Welcome back, everyone. Today we are going to take a look at 2019 Canadian horror film called Rabid. Spoilers ahead. The movie begins as a timid girl called Rose Miller arrives at her workplace at a fashion institute. She hurriedly joins her colleagues gathered around her employer, Gunter. Upon noticing her, Gunter starts ridiculing her for being late. Gunter declares this as Schadenfreude, the pleasure derived from someone else's misfortune. He uncovers a couple of banners to reveal the word written on them. He tells Rose to calm down, saying she helped him illustrate a point. He further explains that there's a part in everyone which wishes for others to fail. He announces that his next collection will be embracing this concept, the darkness of the soul. While Rose is having her breakfast afterwards, the agency photographer, Brad Hart, approaches her and asks her to be his date for the after-party that night. Rose nervously yet excitedly accepts. When her foster sister Chelsea, who's a model at the agency, approaches her, Rose tells her about Brad. This makes Chelsea very excited and she tells Rose she'll glam her up for the night. Later at the party that night, Brad and Rose reveal their passions to each other. Brad reveals his to be photojournalism, while Rose declares fashion design as hers. After a bit of conversation, Rose goes down to the restroom. In a bathroom stall, she oversees a conversation between two women, which reveals that Chelsea had told Brad to ask Rose out. Heartbroken, she goes out and confronts Chelsea. Chelsea apologizes to her, saying she only wanted to help. Enraged, Rose leaves the party. On the way, Rose gets into a horrendous accident. She awakens in a hospital later. The doctor tells her that she has faced permanent disfigurement on the face as a consequence of the accident. When Rose sees her face in a mirror, the terrible sight makes her cry. A huge chunk of her skin is now missing from her face, and the wire holding her jaw closed makes her look like a monster straight from a nightmare. After Rose is discharged, Chelsea brings her to her house. She tells her that Brad left her an email and leaves to run an errand. Rose looks at herself in the mirror and cries at her deformed face. While checking her emails later, she finds an invitation from the Burrow Clinic asking her to visit them. The doctors at the clinic are working on a phenomenon called transhumanism. It aims to induce the continuation of human evolution to something even better. The clinic offers Rose a lifetime of free medical coverage in exchange for letting them do an experimental procedure on her that will fix her face. The next day, Rose and Chelsea visit the clinic. Dr. Burrow tells them that he will treat Rose using a stem cell manipulation treatment. It's something that's still under experimentation, but he assures you that it will fix her face. Burrow briefs them about the experiment and then leaves them to decide if they want to take the offer. Rose seems scared, but Chelsea convinces her to take up the offer, saying this is a golden chance, which is offering her treatment at such a fancy clinic is completely free of cost. While watching them from the outside, Burrow smiles triumphantly. The doctors then perform the experiment on Rose. Brad comes to visit her while she's healing. When he leaves her ward, Burrow pulls him away for a word. Later, while watching Rose through a camera, Burrow holds the picture of his late wife and looks at it lovingly. When Rose awakens, she pulls off her bandages to find her face perfectly healed and more beautiful than ever. Moreover, she doesn't need her specs anymore. She runs fingers over her face, shocked and overjoyed. A moment later, she walks to the pool where she finds a TV actor called Dominic. She goes straight into the pool with him and starts talking. She then grabs him roughly and starts making out with him passionately. When she pulls back, she notices that she's bitten into his lip very hard, which has started making him bleed. She looks at the crimson drops hitting the water and immediately rushes back inside. While Burrow is examining her the next day, she tells him about the previous night. Burrow tells her that she's having vivid dreams, which is a side effect of the surgery. He gives her some medication with the warning that they may cause vivid hallucinations. He also gives her a protein shake, which he says she must drink if she can't do anything else. When Rose goes out to see Chelsea after this, Chelsea doesn't recognize her. Upon realizing it's Rose, she gets extremely happy. After going back to the house, Rose starts pondering what to do with her free time. Chelsea advised her to start designing, thus Rose grabs her sketchbook and pens and starts putting ideas to paper. Brad comes to pay Rose a visit. When she opens the door, he gets wowed at the sight of her. Rose, however, is still very upset with him. Brad asks to take her out, but Rose turns him down, saying she's busy. She then pushes him out and closes the door in his face. That night, Chelsea takes Rose out to party. Gunter sees her as she's entering the club and remarks that she looks well enough to work again. He then notices her dress and asks where it's from. Rose tells him that it's self-designed. Gunter seems really impressed and asks her to start working again. At the party, the girls start wilding. After some drinking and dancing at the club, Rose pulls a random stranger away. She starts getting extremely rough with him. She claws at his abdomen, tearing his skin, and starts biting into his neck. She awakens later, safe and sound in her bed. We're then taken to a studio where Dominic is busy with a shoot. He has turned very aggressive with his behavior, erratic even. When the shooting starts, he grabs the female star so hard that she starts begging to be released. Dom lashes out at her for being unprofessional and starts yelling. The director calms him down and tells him they'll shoot another scene where they can use this anger of his. Another actor, Trent, is then called in. Dom attacks him and tackles him to the ground. The director keeps following them with the camera, thinking it's part of the act, but Dom soon rips off Trent's flesh at the neck, making his blood spurt over him. This makes them all realize what just happened. Rose goes to take her medication, but an excruciating pain starts in her stomach. She drops the pills and collapses onto the floor, crying out in pain. She awakens on the floor to find herself much better. She drinks the shake given by Barreau and starts searching for the fridge for food. After finding nothing else appealing, she grabs a packet of meat and takes the meat out on a plate. After staring at it for a moment, she starts licking the blood from it. We're then shown a man who has been kicked out of the club by bodyguards. While walking away from the guards, he sees a girl and hits on her. The girl totally ignores him, which infuriates him and makes him start yelling. Rose spots him and follows him to his car. When he notices her, she asks him if he can give her a ride. The man gladly agrees and lets her in. In the car, Rose grabs his hand and slowly leads it to her mouth. The man watches her with excitement but yelps in pain and quickly pulls back his hand when Rose bites into it. Rose taunts him, saying she's too rough on him. Feeling insulted, the man comes at her only to be feasted on by her. Rose then wakes up in her bed again after this, only this time her fingers are painted with blood and the coat she wore is hanging by her bed. At the hospital, a nurse gets up to find Trent crying in front of a mirror. She tries to comfort him and tell him that his face will be much better once it healed. Trent turns and violently attacks her. He bites off her fingers, making her cry out at the top of her lungs. When the guards come to her aid, he attacks them too and starts biting them. Rose goes to the clinic and tells Barreau about her frequent and odd hallucinations and terrible stomachache. Barreau tells her that the medications are causing the hallucinations and the aches are common for people undergoing transformation. When she tells him about her odd cravings, he remarks that it's a change of appetite is also a result of the transformation, thus it's okay to be craving different things. Rose goes to work after this. Gunter sees her sketches, which oddly are very dark and sinister. Rose tries to prevent him from seeing them, but Gunter appears to be greatly impressed. He tells her that her drawings are the perfect representatives of Schadenfreude, of the dark part of the soul. He tells her that he wants to add one of her dresses to his collection. The opportunity overjoys Rose, and she gladly takes it. At the hospital, a doctor is seen telling a CDC member that the disease seems to be caused by a mutative, hyperactive strain of rabies. Though the origin of the strain has not yet been identified, the first patient who contacted it has been found, Dominic. They go to see Dominic, who now seems to be unable to control his body and is strapped to a bed due to his violent and aggressive condition. Brad approaches Rose at work and asks if she still wants to avoid him. Rose tells him she's just busy and has to visit the clinic. When Brad asks her why, she tells him she's developed an odd appetite. Taking his chance, Brad asks her out for lunch. Rose realizes she fell right into it and agrees to go. While sitting at a restaurant, Brad caresses Rose's face. As she looks at his hand, temptation takes over Rose and she bites her tongue. She excuses herself and goes to the restroom. She observes her mouth in the mirror to see pointy projections emerging from her mouth. Moreover, an odd organ seems to be forming under her tongue. She walks out and grabs her things to leave. The man from the car spots her through the glass and jumps at her though. Brad pulls the man away from Rose and bashes his head with a fire extinguisher until he dies. He then looks around for Rose, but she's already left. The doctor and the CDC member are seen next to the nurse Trent attacked, who is now exhibiting the same symptoms. The doctor explains that the virus messes with the brain's functions and makes the affected go insane. It fills them with rage and makes them highly aggressive. The CDC representative and the doctor decide to vaccinate the ones who haven't been infected yet and isolate the infected ones so they can be kept comfortable until they terminate. The doctor suggests making a public announcement about the infection and its harms, but the CDC member strongly opposes it. He says they don't need public hysteria, thus the situation must be dealt with caution. A blood-curdling scream is heard from the streets. Rose is shown looking at her face in a mirror, which has now transformed into a strange organ. She collapses in despair and starts crawling on all fours. A man approaches her and attempts to console her, but she keeps hiding her face and crawling away. He follows her into a dark alley where she transforms into an alien creature and kills him. Rose then has an odd dream about a creepy walking doctors who are bandaging the face of a woman who's wearing the dress she designed. When she later uncovers her face, she finds a disgusting, strange structure in its steed and cries out in terror. Rose awakens from this dream startled. She calls Barreau and leaves him a message telling him about the aches and nightmares. She then checks her mouth and finds it completely normal. While drinking the protein formula given by the doctor, she accidentally drops it and realizes that the bottle is filled with blood. Later at work, Rose gets Chelsea in the dress she made for Gunter's new collection. After Chelsea leaves, Brad approaches Rose and asks about their earlier date. Rose tells him she was just sick and she couldn't even remember going back to her house. Brad tells her he took her back. Rose seems confused, but she thanks him. Gunter calls Rose as Chelsea steps in front of him in her dress. She realizes he wants improvements and makes a few alterations to the dress. This impresses Gunter greatly, and he announces that Chelsea, clad in this dress, will close the show. The girls shriek in excitement as this was their biggest dream, since this honor is given to the most magnificent dress and model. At the night of the fashion show, a public announcement is made regarding the outbreak of rabies. People are asked to keep their distance from animals as well as people showing aggressive behavior. When a reporter asks Gunter why he's holding the fashion show in tough times of an epidemic, he declares that fashion stops for nobody. Backstage, Rose notices that Chelsea hasn't arrived yet. Burrow calls Rose and asks her to come to the clinic ASAP. Rose tells him she's busy and can only visit the next morning. Chelsea arrives and tells the other models that she's been bitten by a woman. A makeup artist then pulls her away to glam her up for the show. Rose steps out to call Chelsea, but the terrible stomachache starts again. Two men approach her and start videoing her. An odd appendage extends from Rose's underarm and pierces through one of the men's throats. Brad appears behind the other man who is recording her and beats him up, before deleting the video. He then gives Rose an injection and takes her away. The man she just attacked arises from the ground like a zombie and stares back at them. Rose later awakens in front of a mirror in the dressing room and weakly starts walking around in confusion. Glimpses of Brad are shown as he takes pictures of an unconscious Rose. Brad appears in front of Rose and tells her that she passed out earlier. He tells her to go to the clinic with him, but Rose refuses to go without watching her dress close the show. The fashion show begins and Rose takes her seat beside Gunter. Models come and go as the audience cheers and applauds. A male model suddenly starts gagging on the stage. He manages to gain his balance and starts walking back but stumbles and falls off the stage. He weakly climbs back up and walks back inside. The audience see him off with applause and the show continues. Brad again tells Rose that they need to leave immediately, but Rose refuses. Just then, a scream is heard from the back of the stage. An injured model cries out, followed by a blood-splattered Chelsea. Rose tries to get to her, but Brad pulls her away. Chelsea walks to the stage and starts tossing models aside. As Gunter starts yelling at her for ruining his show, she jumps at him and starts eating him. The man from the street walks inside, now mutated and deformed, but the police immediately shoot him dead. Chelsea gets up and looks at the screaming Rose. The police shoot her to death as well. Rose rushes to her side, but Brad pulls her away and takes her to Burrow's clinic. When they reach the clinic, Brad tells Burrow that things have gotten out of hand. Burrow, however, sternly tells him he has everything under control. Rose says that she believes the virus came from her because everything has been happening around her. Burrow tells her that she had an opportunity to prevent the virus from spreading. He sends her and Brad into a room, but as soon as they walk in, the door locks behind them. Through the glass, Burrow tells Rose that he hired Brad to keep an eye on her. Rose stares at Brad in disbelief. Burrow says Brad, a journalist, wanted a story and this experiment was a perfect one. Brad denies this and tells Rose that he just wanted to protect her and he loves her, but she pushes him away, saying she does not believe him. Brad starts banging at the glass and yells at Burrow. Burrow presses a button, a result of which blood is poured all over Brad. Temptation takes over Rose, which Burrow starts encouraging. As Brad retreats to a corner, a deformed creature with several odd appendages grabs his shoulder. He moves away in fright and pulls out his knife. Burrow explains that this creature is his wife, who donated her body for experiments after realizing she had untreatable cancer. Burrow declares her as the breakthrough of this research. Rose's predatory appendage emerges and tears through Brad's throat, killing him in the process. Rose used Brad's knife to cut off the appendage as Burrow screams at her not to. She also kills the deformed creature with the knife and slits her throat at the end, leaving the doctor to grieve in the loss of both of his creations. Burrow is later seen preparing a blend of blood and meat as the news broadcasts at the end of the violent rabies epidemic. He sets this blend and some meat on a tray and leaves the room. He then returns and observes through the glass as Rose awakens with the tray in front of her. She notices that her throat has been healed, thus realizing that Burrow again used the stem cell therapy on her. She starts banging at the glass in rage and sorrow as the doctor smiles at her from the outside. Drop a comment below letting me know how you liked it. Make sure to like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell. Thank you for watching.